So back in 2019, Robert Smith organized the Meltdown Festival. He curated it, he chose a bunch of different bands to play, and he listened to a bunch of new music in the process. It was this act of listening to new albums that made him want to make another Cure record. He saw what everyone else was doing, and then he kind of said, oh man, I want to do that too. And then of course Robert Smith is one of those people that just yaps. He's kind of a yapper. Robert Smith told a bunch of different press outlets to expect a new Cure album by the end of 2019. He promised it, he said it would come to pass. It did not. And so for the next few years following that, we heard all these different things. We heard that the Cure's next record was going to be their darkest, it was going to be their most gloomy, it was going to be the saddest thing they had ever made. And then different players in the band would say different things, and they would talk about how they were working on like 20 or 30 songs. And the entire time the Cure were touring, and they were still playing festivals, and they were playing these big shows and these big long dates. And I don't think it was until 2022 that we actually got a taste of the album whenever the Cure started playing new songs live. Whenever I saw them in 2023, they played 5 of the songs from this record at that show, and again, the record hadn't even been released. And there were all kinds of jokes that people, myself included, were making during this period, because Robert Smith was still saying that an album was going to come out, but no one actually believed him. First we were told that the album was going to be called Live from the Moon, and then it became Songs of a Lost World. And then whenever they started promoting the album without the album actually being out, people were calling it Shows of a Lost Album. But then finally at the tail end of 2024, the album dropped. And so it's kind of hard to believe it, but the album has been out for about a year now. And you know what? It's freaking great. It was great whenever it came out, and it was being awarded all kinds of high scores by different music review outlets. And you know what? It's still freaking great. I think that sometimes pieces of media, or really anything, can suffer from a sort of newness bias. People like things that are new. I think people will sometimes look back on things that they rated highly whenever they came out, and they will go, you know what? That wasn't as good as I thought it was. But that's not really the case with Songs of a Lost World. I thought it was great then, and I still think it's great. And really, I don't know that this album is what we were promised. It's not the gloomiest Cure record. It's not the darkest Cure record. It's not the saddest thing they ever made. But it is great. And really one of the best compliments I can pay this album is by saying that it feels effortless. And I mean that in the best way possible. It feels like an album that simply is. Sometimes things feel forced. Sometimes they feel unnatural. This record is not that. This record feels like a fully formed piece of art. And in order to promote this record, Robert Smith did a multitude of interviews. He did a lot of really long interviews with different radio show hosts. And you know that this album was not effortless. It took a lot of work. There were all kinds of different arrangements for different songs. There were all kinds of different track listings that he had come up with. He said that at one point the album was 12 songs long, and it was all of the darkest songs they'd ever written. And his wife said, hey, this is too much. And there are different songs on here, like I Can Never Say Goodbye. And it sounds like that was also the thing with this song. At one point it sounds like this song was like 12 minutes long, and it was just so dark and depressing. And so whenever I hear the record, like I said, it sounds effortless to me, but I don't think it was. And I think it's a really masterfully put together album. I think on the whole it is very close to Disintegration, and I recall even saying that to my buddy before this record came out, back when we were only seeing live clips on YouTube of the new songs. I distinctly recall telling him that the new material was Disintegration level, and I stand by it. I think it's freaking great. And this is one of those records that confuses me because of the fact that it's so good compared to like what they've been doing for the last like 35 years or something. It's like, dang, did you guys remember how to make good music again? It's just weird because it's like, wow, what have you guys been doing? You should have been doing this instead of, you know, doing the self-titled record or whatever. And I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because I feel like this is one of those records that only could have been made by the band with where they are right now at this point in time. The band is older and Robert Smith is in his late 60s. And honestly, this is an album that focuses a lot on that, I think. Robert Smith has always talked about aging and a fear of aging in his lyrics, and we're kind of at the point where he is aged. He's always been scared of getting older, and now he has officially gotten older. And so this is an album that's written by an older Robert Smith, and it's very much reflecting on who he was as a kid, and where he's been, and where he is now. And so with that introduction, I guess we will go ahead and hop into the album proper, starting with track 1, Alone. Just the title of the song alone, I think, sets up the album in a really great way. It immediately tells you that this is not going to be a kiss me, kiss me, kiss me kind of record. It's not going to be the head on the door. It's not going to be a pop record. I mean, if you're starting the album with a track called Alone that starts with like a 3.5 minute or 4 minute long instrumental introduction, you already kind of know that it's not going to be an upbeat record. And this album has a lot of references to older Cure songs. I don't think I'm going to be able to pick up all of them because I'm sure that there are some hidden that aren't immediately obvious. But this song has a lot of lyrics that were inspired by previous Cure works. And even there's a sound in the song where it was a piece of percussion that was pulled from The Drowning Man. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to listen for, but I do think that I can pick up on it. I do think I can point it out and be like, hey, that's faith right there. This is the end of every song we sing. This is a lyric along with Endsong that makes a lot of people think that this is the Cure's last record. Spoiler alert though, it's not. It sounds like they've been working on a follow-up to this record, so this is not the end of every song we sing, I guess. This entire song was inspired by a poem called Dregs, and upon reading the poem and reading some of these other lyrics in this song, it makes me think that this is not the first song to have been inspired by that poem. The fire burned out to ash and the stars grown dim with tears. The fire burned out to ash, that makes me think of 39 off Bloodflowers. That song is all about how the fire is almost out. And then the stars grow dim with tears, that's a reference. It's a reference to wish impossible things. Cold and afraid, the ghosts of all that we've been, we toast with bitter dregs to our emptiness. This is a song that makes me think of winter, because if it's summer and the fire's out, you don't really care because you're not going to be cold. But I mean, if you're cold and afraid, then it's probably cold, I guess. The ghosts of all that we've been is a very important lyric, I think, for this album, just because of what I was saying, where it feels like this album is very much reflecting on where the band was and where they are now. And the birds falling out of our skies and the words falling out of our minds. And here is to love, to all the love falling out of our lives. So that first part about the birds makes me think of Where the Birds Always Sing off Bloodflowers once again. That song is about the idea of wishing for a place where the birds always sing, or in other words, where there's no death. And so if the birds are falling out of our skies, that is a reminder that there is indeed death. And I will say, I think this record is really heavily influenced by Bloodflowers. The second part of this stanza and the words falling out of our minds, that makes me think of Disintegration, because he sings all throughout that record about being unable to find the right words. And then the final part of the stanza about the love falling out of our lives, that's just kind of a Cure lyric. I guess that's kind of a familiar theme that you always see cropping up in Cure songs. Just the idea of losing love, or of things not working out, or two people falling out of love. Once again, the loudest sound off of Bloodflowers, this is a great example of that. But really, again, it harkens back to stuff like Disintegration and The Last Dance. I think you could kind of make a connection there. Robert Smith talks about a lot of the same themes, and so as a result, I don't know how much time I should spend going over this record and making connections that maybe aren't blatantly obvious, because if I wanted to do that, then I think we could do it all day. In other words, if I had a nickel for every Cure song that was about lost love, I would have a lot of nickels. Hopes and dreams are gone, the end of every song. And it all stops. Oh man, there's a freaking song of Bloodflowers that talks about things stopping. Maybe someday, that's it. We were always sure that we would never change, and it all stops. We were always sure that we would stay the same, but it all stops. And we close our eyes to sleep, to dream, a boy and a girl who dream the world is nothing but a dream. There you get a little bit of solipsism, and again, the idea of a boy and a girl who dream the world is nothing but a dream. That harkens back to basically every love song that the Cure has ever written. Once again, The Loudest Sound, or Boys Don't Cry, or There Is No If. Where did it go? Where did it go? Broken voiced lament to call us home. This is the end of every song we sing alone. Talking about the instrumental of this track for a minute, it just sounds so ephemeral and ethereal and so beautiful. I feel like the live version and the studio version of this song are very different, but I think both are freaking great. But I do think that this studio version of Alone is beautiful in a way that you can't really replicate in a live setting. There's just so much layering with each of the tracks, and it's just freaking gorgeous. And so this was released as the lead single for the album, and I really just appreciate this song. I think it's a great start to the record, and it really kind of shows that the Cure are back on the right track once again. And so with that, we will move on to track 2, and Nothing Is Forever. And Nothing Is Forever is a really touching song, I think, about being there for someone whenever they're dying, or rather not being there for someone when they're dying.
They knew that they were dying, and I'd promised them that I would be with them when they died, and I didn't for a number of reasons, none of them particularly good reasons, although out of my control. I wasn't able to physically be in the room when they died. I got there very shortly afterwards, and it really, really upset me. And it upset me enormously, actually, because not just because I hadn't kept my promise, but because I wasn't there. The song was just an immediate response to that.
During the making of this album and the writing of it, which took place over a period of like 15 years or something like that, Robert Smith had a lot of people in his family die. I believe both his parents died, his brother died, which we'll get on to, and very likely more people than just those three passed away. I don't really feel comfortable speculating on who this song might be about because it feels kind of tasteless to do that, quite frankly. But needless to say, I do think that dying is a scary thing for literally anyone. And I'm hard pressed to believe that there is anyone who wouldn't want their loved ones there to comfort them whenever they are passing away from this life. And Robert Smith has said that this song was written from the perspective of the person who he had made the promise to.
The voice I'm singing in is that person's voice. They're singing it to me. So it's not quite what it seems when I sing it. The first person isn't really me, so I'm singing from their perspective, it was difficult.
And he wrote it as a way of sort of dealing with the guilt or the unhappiness that he was feeling for not being able to be there for them. And whenever an interviewer asked him, do you think that this person would have been comforted knowing that you had written a song about them, Robert Smith said that he thinks that yes, the song would have helped them to feel a little bit better. Promise you'll be with me in the end. Say we'll be together, that you won't forget. However far away, you will remember me in time. This reminds me of Love Song, no matter how far away I will always love you. Promise you'll be with me in the end, say we'll be together, and with no regret. That line right there, and no regret, I interpret that as basically saying that if Robert Smith had been there for that person, then he wouldn't feel regret for not being there, and so basically that would have been the happiest ending, but unfortunately that's not how real life played out. And slide down close beside me in the silence of a heartbeat, and wrap your arms around me with a murmured lullaby, as a memory of the first time in the stillness of a teardrop, as you hold me for the last time in the dying of the light, which of course is a reference to that poem. I think it's by Dylan Thomas, Rage, Rage On, against the dying of the light. Oh, I know that my world has grown old, and nothing is forever, but it really doesn't matter if you say we'll be together, if you promise you'll be with me in the end, and slide down close beside me in the silence of a heartbeat. And so I think in a lot of ways this is a really delicate love song, but it's not really about love in the romantic sense. It's about love in the most tender way possible. Just being there for someone, just loving them in their worst moments, essentially. It feels like a tender, delicate kind of love. Track 3 is a fragile thing, which Robert Smith has described as being the love song on the album. And this was released, I believe, as the second single off this record, and it was one of the 5 songs that they were playing off this album before this album came out, and it's one of my favorite songs on the album. There's just something about it that's very tender and catchy, and it gets stuck in my head all the time. It has kind of a looping melody that reminds me a lot of is it Eric Satie? Is that how you say his name? It's like Gymnasio .1 or something. I'm not French. I don't know French. Bonjour, bonjour, baguette. But it reminds me a lot of that. Of course, this song is more upbeat than that one, but it reminds me of that one just in terms of how it keeps on looping and going and how there isn't... It feels almost like there isn't really a clear ending to the measure. Every time you kiss me, I could cry, she said. Don't tell me how you miss me, I could die tonight of a broken heart. This loneliness has changed me, we have been too far apart. And it's too late now for me to just forget. I never thought I'd need to feel regret for all that I never was. And so Robert Smith has said that this song is about how tender and delicate of a thing that love is. He said that it's one thing that you have to kind of hold on to, and you kind of have to make sure that it's intact and it stays that way. Because if you're not careful in maintaining a certain love, then even the oldest and previously strongest of relationships can break down. I never thought I'd need to feel regret for all I never was. That's a really stinging and painful lyric, I think, because it's certainly something I fear and something I can relate to, the idea of not becoming all that you had the potential to be. That's a very scary concept to me because of the fact that it is so possible to lose out on all your potential, and it's possible to look back on the end of your life and look over what your life is and what you became and to go, I screwed up, I made a mistake. People die every day who feel that way, and it makes me think of all the regrets that people have before they die. There are like 5 regrets that some nurse came up with. Basically, people just regret not being there for the people who they care about and who matter to them, and they regret not paying attention to the things that matter most. No one regrets going after a dream and chasing it and taking a risk. No one regrets trying to better themselves or trying to go after a decent relationship or something. No one regrets trying to leave a bad situation. You might regret how things turned out, you might regret the way that things went down, but especially whenever I look back on my own life, I don't regret taking the risks that I've taken, even if they haven't paid off. I don't regret starting a YouTube channel and making these freaking cure videos. I don't really regret taking a risk and majoring in English whenever I went to school. And I'm fortunate enough to be in the position where whenever I look back on past relationships, I don't really regret the fact that none of them worked out, you know what I mean? Like, there were girls I asked out, and I'm glad I asked them out, but I'm also glad that things didn't work out with them. And there are many things like that where it's like, I wish that maybe things had ended up better, but at the end of the day, I'm not ashamed of the actions I took. And so that's just a really painful lyric that I think about all the time. I never thought I'd need to feel regret for all I never was, but all this time alone has left me hurt and sad and lost. Yeah, every time you kiss me, I could cry. Don't tell me how you miss me, I could die tonight of a broken heart. This loneliness has changed me, we've been too far apart. That last lyric reminds me of Apart off of Wish. And Wish as an album has a lot of really sad songs about relationships falling apart or not working. From The Edge of the Deep Green Sea, or A Letter to Elise, or Trust. And there are all kinds of different Cure songs I could point to that fit that description. Songs of sadness and loss. This loneliness has changed me, we have been too far apart, and there's nothing you can do to change it back, she said. Nothing you can do but sing, this love is a fragile thing. Nothing you can do but pretend again. And I interpret this chorus as basically just saying that there is no way to repair a love that's been broken. If you have two people and somehow they've hurt each other, then there's no fixing that. And I think you see this all the time where people will date each other and then they'll break up and then they'll get back together and then they'll break up and then they'll get back together and break up. And you should know after the first time that you break up with someone that it probably isn't right. I don't really believe in going back to people or things or jobs or whatever that have hurt you, but I think that's certainly what this song is about. Is it's about the impossibility of repairing a broken or lost or a damaged love. Every time you leave me is a lie, she said. You make believe you need me, but you try too hard and it feels so wrong. You promise me forever and you say it won't be long. Those two lines, you promise me forever and you say it won't be long, are really interesting. You promise me forever reminds me of a song that my mom used to sing, like a lullaby. I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. That's kind of what it reminds me of, is just the idea that you can say things like that when you're in love, that you'll love someone forever or you'll always be there for them. And you say it won't be long makes me think of dying, honestly. I don't know if that's the way that the line is supposed to be interpreted, but it kind of makes me think of the idea. I talked about this actually in a My Chemical Romance video. I talked about the idea of Romeo and Juliet, where they are lovers who are seen as being together forever because of the fact they died while in love. And so if you die while you're in love with someone and people know that you two are in love together, then I think people will just kind of imagine and believe that that love would have lasted forever, even if maybe that isn't the case. Yeah, this is not a very happy album. This is not the bleakest thing The Cure has ever written. I think that Pornography and Faith are both bleaker albums. And I think even Bloodflowers might be bleaker because of the fact that that album has a certain anger to it. But at the same time, this is very much not a pop Cure record. A Fragile Thing is probably the most poppy track on the record. And still, as I'm explaining, it's a song about like love falling apart and not lasting. And then the song ends with the lyric, no, nothing you can do to change the end, implying a sort of fatality to things, or rather a sort of fatalism to things. That's what I was trying to say, but I guess fatality also works since we all die. I was trying to say that it implies that certain things are predestined and won't be changed, but also death is forever written in the stars, so make of that what you will, I guess. On to track 4. Track 4 is Warsong, which was actually the first new song that we hadn't heard before this record came out. Before the record came out, because of the fact that we hadn't heard it, there were a lot of people who were like throwing fits online because they were like, why is he writing a song about Ukraine and Russia? Like, that's how they were interpreting the song, again, before the record was even out, just based on the title alone. But that's not what the song is. It's not a political song, and also supporting Ukraine shouldn't be that crazy of a take, but whatever. We won't talk about what the people thought the song was about, we'll just talk about the song. Oh, it's misery, the way we fight, for bitter ends, we tear the night in two. I want your death, you want my life. I see this song basically as being about two people who are fighting. Obviously, it's called Warsong, so if someone is at war, there has to be someone they're warring against. I want your death implies that the speaker of this song, whether it's Robert Smith or not, wants a certain someone dead. And then you want my life is a twist on that, because if you want to take someone's life, then you want them dead. But if you want someone's life, that typically means that you want to be in their position, you want to be in their place and their spot and have their status, you want to have their success or their fame or their fortune or blah blah blah. To use a biblical term, it's essentially you coveting someone's life. But if it is Robert writing from his own perspective, then it seems to make sense that someone would want his life, because of course with The Cure he's achieved a lot of success and he's had a marriage that's lasted for 30 or 40 years. And he's still releasing massive hit records and he's still selling out stadiums. And he's still making art that people care about. And that can't be said for most of the people who he came up with. I can't really think of another band from that same era, from that same post-punk era, who is still together, who's making stuff that's worthwhile. Certainly there are solo acts and stuff from that era, like David Byrne is still putting out stuff. Sting went solo decades ago, but a lot of other great bands from that era are just gone or stopped making music. You know, I love Susie and the Banshees, but their last record came out I think in 1995, and then they haven't toured since like 2002. It's just been Susie herself. And so that line makes a lot of sense to me if you consider that this song is written from Robert's perspective, which I don't know if it is. We tell each other lies to hide the truth, and hate ourselves for everything we do is shame. Wounded pride, vengeful anger burning deep inside, poison in our blood, in pain, broken dreams, mournful hopes, for all we might have been, all misunderstood. Again, that for all we might have been goes back to what I was talking about in A Fragile Thing, the idea of not living up to your potential. No way out of this, no way for us to find a way to peace we never found before. However we regret, all we will ever know is bitter ends, for we were born to war. I'm actually reminded of a Health Perturbator song, Body Prison, that has the line, we should have been enemies, it would have been better than this. Because I interpret this song in the end as basically being about a rival, maybe? Someone who you should have been friends with, someone who you should have been at peace with, but instead you're at war with them. And I see this song as basically being about regretting that and sort of wishing that things were different. And then, as is my custom of saying, that is the end of side A of the record, and so if you have the vinyl disc, then you flip it over. And we'll move on to track 5, Drone, Nodrone. Drone, Nodrone is the heaviest song on the album, and it's one of the heaviest Cure songs ever. I feel like in a lot of ways this is what the self-titled record should have sounded like, because it's obvious they were going for a more aggressive, angrier sound on that record, but it just sounds like garbage. The mixing and production and everything about that album just makes it sound bad, and some of the songs are actually really cool. There was one I was listening to recently, Please Come Home, which was a B-side that didn't make it onto the record. I think the actual songwriting is really good. I just think that the mixing and the production is just straight trash. Like, that album sounds so freaking bad, and I wish it didn't. And so Drone, Nodrone to me kind of continues in that same style, except it actually sounds good. The production and the songwriting is good. And Simon Gallup's bass sounds so heavy in this. I saw someone saying that they felt like he was trying to be too heavy metal with his bass tone, but that's exactly what I love about it. It's certainly a unique Cure song in their discography, because again, it's a heavy Cure song and there aren't too many Cure songs like that. In terms of like atmosphere or tone, it reminds me of The Kiss off Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. It's kind of like It's Over off of 413 Dream, but really it's just a lot heavier and groovier than those tracks. Robert Smith has said that it's the Fascination Street of the record, and yeah, I think that's a fair description. Just like in Fascination Street, the bass line in the song is the driving feature of it. And Robert Smith said that this song was written after he saw a drone above his house, and he was realizing that he was feeling disconnected from the world.
My first experience of a drone flying over where I was and hovering and obviously filming, and I felt so vulnerable in a bit, just I'm not threatened, but just like there's nothing I could do about it. And I thought, this is really, was at that moment was symptomatic of all I hate about the modern world. I'm coming to terms with the end of what's been a very chaotic life in many respects.
Whenever the band was making this album, they overhauled the studios to make it look like the moon landing. So I believe they put up newspaper clippings from that time and pictures of the moon landing. Again, like I said, the album was initially called Live from the Moon, and Robert Smith said that the reason he did this was because he was trying to recapture that sense of childhood wonder and awe, because for him, the moon landing was a big event. He was a child whenever he saw it, and so as a result, it was something that made him hopeful for the future. It made him feel like humanity was going places, and he was proud to be part of the human race. And he says that he doesn't have that same optimism now, and instead it's been replaced with a growing cynicism and pessimism. Because he feels that we should be farther advanced than we are, we should be farther ahead, and the world should be different than what it is. And I completely agree with that. And so Drone, Nodrone is basically a track that's about him interacting with the modern world and sort of disliking it, like turning his back on it almost. And this is something that I certainly understand all too well. I'm not a Luddite, and I know more about technology than most people, but at the same time, that's probably what makes me hate it sometimes. The modern world has a lot of really cool conveniences, but it also has a lot of garbage. But all in all, the lyrics for this song are actually pretty cryptic, and I don't really have that good of a grasp on them past what Robert Smith himself has said in interviews. I'm breaking up again, I feel it in the air. I'm not really sure what to say, I don't remember being there at all. Yeah, I know, there's no question that I was, but the answers that I have are not the answers that you want. So it's all, don't know, I really don't, and I'll think so, but maybe not, and all, could this be a case of me misplacing my identity? I guess it's more or less like ending up as a nobody. I guess you could interpret these lyrics as basically about the fact that everything is documented nowadays. Everyone takes pictures of everything and everyone has videos of everything. And so I'm sure Robert Smith has had it before where people have asked him, hey, did you say this? And he's like, no, I didn't. And then they'll pull up a video of him from like 10 years ago where he says something. And that's something I've had happen to me before, where someone will be like, hey, do you remember when you made this joke that made me laugh really hard? And I'm like, no, I don't remember that. Or I had a buddy who sent me a screenshot of a text conversation that we had a few years ago that apparently he had saved. And I was reading it and I was like, I have no memory of writing this whatsoever. And it was funny, I was making some pretty good jokes, but I saw it and I was like, I don't remember this. We're able to capture things in such a pristine and perfect way, and it honestly is strange. Because going back like 20 or 30 years, it used to be that the only people who would have their lives filmed all the freaking time were celebrities. But now that's just kind of what everyone does. Everyone takes pictures of themselves and of the people around them. And so you just have a lot of instances of people capturing moments in time that maybe don't deserve to be captured, not because they're bad or anything, but just because they're unimportant. And so I think that plays into things as well, just the idea that so much of modern technology is dominating our life and the way that we remember things. I think that being online 24/7, having pictures and having video of every event you've ever been to, I think that must be shaping in some way, shape, or form the way we remember things and the way we think about things. Speaking of My Chemical Romance again, I did a video on their Long Live the Black Parade tour, which is currently ongoing, and it was an absolutely incredible show. But whenever I look at the videos that like my sister took, I don't feel the same way about it. And so I do think that videos can remind you of certain things. I think they can remind you of actions that took place or of good times, good events. But also I do think that it's impossible to capture everything about a certain moment. And I think especially before in the past, we haven't been concerned with capturing everything exactly as it was because of the fact that that's not really how we see things. It's not how we think about things. Going back like 300 years ago, you could only write stuff down. There were no cameras, there were no videos. And so you could only write stuff down in a journal and try to make note of everything you felt and everything you remember seeing. Or you could try to paint, you could try to capture it. And we're very much the ones putting experiences down onto the page, and so we're influencing them and how they will be remembered. And so you don't really have that anymore. Things aren't the same way that they were, and I think there's a lot less left to the imagination now. I think pretty much anything now can be found or seen online, for better or for worse. There are a lot of great things it has done for us as a people and as a society and as the human race or whatever, but certainly as much as you gain things, you also lose some too. Down, 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 yeah, I'm pretty much done. Staring down the barrel of the same warm gun. Down, 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 yeah, I'm pretty much done. I lose my reason when I fall through the door. Endless black night, lost and looking for more. At least I know now how I lose it before. One last shot at happiness. These lyrics kind of remind me of Open off Wish, just the idea of being led around by alcohol almost. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if this song is about alcohol or anything like that. But again, I'm just trying to make sense of the lyrics because this is maybe my favorite song on the record, but it's also the one I understand the least. And the line, one last shot at happiness, is something that I think about a lot because personally I've struggled with this feeling before, that sometimes you just feel like you screwed up and that's it. You have no more chances at happiness. There was an entire freaking video I made where it was about the idea that you have more chances in life, I have more chances in life. Just because a relationship or a job or a career opportunity or some kind of creative venture, just because these various things that we engage with don't go well, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the end. And I think you can see that pretty clearly with bands. You know, the band The Cure has been around for like 46 years or something. But before that, there were other bands that Robert Smith was in. And just because those bands ended, that didn't mean his career as a musician ended. And so I think you don't have just one shot at happiness. I think you have many shots at happiness. And so I think that's actually kind of a hopeful take on that lyric. I know there's something up, it's also hit and miss. I'm trying to make some sense of it. I guess the explanation is I can't anymore, if I ever really could. Kind of strange to think it takes this long to get misunderstood. It's talking about not being able to make sense of things anymore the way that you used to be able to. And so I think that's the connection to the rest of the album. It's kind of a then versus now sort of thing. Who have I become? And the person that I have become is not able to make sense of the things that I used to have been able to make sense of. And so really this, like I said, it's one of my favorite songs off this record, but I don't really know what to make of it. Certainly though, I don't like drones. I don't like the feeling of being watched 24/7. And I am a guy who goes and I record myself on my camera in front of a green screen and I post these videos online. But at the same time, I don't really like the feeling of being on camera. I don't like the feeling of just taking pictures of my life or just taking pictures with people. It just feels kind of strange. And I've never really liked it. And the only reason I'm able to do this, the only reason I'm able to talk in front of a camera is because I see it as something creative. It's a necessary part of making videos. And so I do it. But at the same time, I really connect with and resonate with what I think Robert Smith is talking about. Just that disconnect between what you feel and how you feel about certain things, and then how the world is changing and what the world is choosing to embrace. Track 6 is I Can Never Say Goodbye, which Robert Smith has stated explicitly is about his brother's death. Thunder rolling in to drown November moon. In cold black rain as lightning splits the sky apart, I'm whispering his name. He has to wake up, love slipping away. Hear the bells beyond the sea, it's almost too late. Shadows growing closer now and there's nowhere left to hide. And I can't break this dreamless sleep, however hard I try. I'm down on my knees and empty inside. Something wicked this way comes from out the cruel and treacherous night. Something wicked this way comes to steal away my brother's life. This is a song that Robert Smith worked on a lot because the first version of it was very similar to the finished one from what I understand. But then Robert Smith felt like he needed to go in and add more details, and he basically, by his own admission, it sounds like he kind of overwrote it. And so the song ended up being like 12 minutes long or something, and it just ended up being this funeral dirge. And it was just him talking about his brother, and it had many verses. But then as he continued working on the song, he felt like it was too much, and so he went back to the way that it initially was whenever he began writing it. It's more vague than some of the things he had written, and it's more poetic. But as a result, he feels like it's a better song. Certainly, this is one of my favorites on the album, and I think this is a very touching song because he wrote it about his brother's death. And he said that this is the one song that whenever they play live, the band all kind of look to him and make sure that he's all right. I find it very touching that he would write a song like this that's so beautiful and loving towards his brother. I told my mom this, that if I wrote a song about my brother's death, then it would go woohoo! Like, I think she got the joke. I think that she got I was referencing Song 2 by Blur. But I don't think she liked it. Also, that's very much a joke. I don't hate my brother, and I've supported him and worn his band's shirt on this channel, and blah blah blah. It was a joke. Don't find me in the comments. Something Wicked This Way Comes is a Ray Bradbury novel, and I believe Robert Smith said that his brother introduced him to the works of Ray Bradbury. I think he said his brother, this particular brother, was like 10 years older than him, because I think Robert Smith is like the youngest of his siblings or something like that. And he said that his brother showed him a lot of cool stuff, and he has a lot of good memories with his brother, and so this is just a very loving and touching tribute to him. Track 7 is All I Ever Am, which is the third and final of the songs on this album that we had not heard before this album came out. And that's also half of the reason why it's taken me so long to get to this record. You see, I never thought this album was going to be out, and so people would post the live recordings of Alone and A Fragile Thing and Nothing Is Forever, I Can Never Say Goodbye, and Endsong, which are the 5 songs that we heard off this record before it came out. And I would just listen to them on repeat because these songs are freaking great. But at the same time, I didn't think we were ever getting an album. And so by the time the album finally came out, I was like, wow, I feel like I've listened to this before. Because I basically I'd been listening to it for the last like year or so before the album actually came out. And so that's part of the reason why it's taken me so long to actually do this one. Because I love this record, but I'd listened to it too much, I think. All I Ever Am is yet another track about Robert Smith reflecting on who he was and who he's become. And it's basically about the idea that you are different people throughout the years, but at the same time, you're still you, but the way that you 20 years ago might have acted is not the way that you right now would have acted.
Like your sense of right and wrong, your whole moral code, it's like it's all tied up with who you are. And it's like, so at what point you become that person, and whether you stay as that person, whether you like, and of course you change through time, but you still have this sort of like hankering, this nagging sense that there is an essence of you somewhere, like this sort of kernel of meanness. It doesn't bear much scrutiny though. It's like one of those things, it's trying to kind of like hold on to sand.
And whenever he's described the song, he sounds like really unconfident, like he isn't sure if that idea comes across, but I think it does. I think I completely resonate with it. Even reflecting on who I was like 10 years ago, I can notice obviously the differences between then and now. But at the same time, I still feel like the core of who I am now is in who I was 10 years ago. I feel like if anything has changed, I've just been able to become more confident and more like proud of who I am, not necessarily in like a Luciferian prideful way. I'm not embarrassed by who I am. That's probably a better way of saying it. Or in other words, I feel better as a person. Like I know I have something to offer the world. And back then I wasn't sure of that, but I very much have sympathy for who I was, you know, a long time ago. I think too much of all that's gone, of how it was before my thoughts obsessed with choices made for sure. In ignorance of history and consequence, as more and more I misremember hopelessly. Essentially here, I think he's saying that he thinks a lot about who he was before certain things were put in stone. Because certainly whenever you're younger, you are seen to have more potential. If you have like a 15-year-old kid who's just entering high school, then they have a world of opportunities before them. You know, they could go in any direction. They don't have a degree, and so as a result, they could potentially choose anything as long as they have the proper resources. They could be a doctor, or they could be a lawyer, or they could be a sports player or something. I don't know, a sports player, what the fuck is that? They could be a football player. Whenever you're younger, it feels like you have nothing set in stone, and that's a feeling that I've always actually kind of hated. Because I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard to not have a great grasp on who you are, or what's worse, this is what I experienced. It's hard to have a grasp on who you are and to know who you are and what you're all about, and then to have people say, no, you're not that. Because it's really hard to tell people that you want to be a writer, and then to have people go, well, what's your backup plan? It's really hard to work on a YouTube channel and then to have people be like, well, you know, when are you gonna give up? Which is something that I've been asked before. Back when my channel only had like 400 subscribers, I was putting out videos weekly, and I had all my friends and family being like, all right, how long are you gonna do this for? At what point do you give up? Unfortunately, people don't do that anymore, or at least they haven't in a long time. And so I think there's a certain option paralysis that comes with having everything open to you. But as Robert Smith is singing about, I think that there is also a sort of like trapped feeling if you look back on your choices and you realize that you've made most of the choices that matter. I remember seeing something that said that your like 20s are your defining decade because of the fact that you make 8 of the 10 most important choices when you're in your 20s. And so once you hit like 30 and 40, then you're kind of locked into your life to a certain extent. And of course you can reinvent yourself. And I think that's why a lot of people have midlife crises. But at the same time, you are kind of locked in and you are running out of time ultimately, and there's no getting around it. If you're 50, then you're going to have a harder time making a career change than someone who is 20. And then that line, I misremember hopelessly, I think just goes back to drone, no drone, and just that feeling that you're remembering things differently than the way that they actually were, or you're remembering things differently than the way that they were captured on film or in photographs. And I really like this stanza right here. I lose all my life like this, reflecting time and memories, and all for fear of what I'll find if I just stop and empty out my mind of all the ghosts and all the dreams, in belief that all I ever am is somehow never quite all I am now. I relate heavily to that first part. I lose all my life like this, reflecting time and memories, and all for fear of what I'll find if I just stop. People say that you need to live in the present, and that's the only way to escape anxiety or depression. People will say that depression exists in the past and anxiety exists in the future. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think depression is actually something that very much exists in the present, but that may be a discussion for another video. Regardless, people say that you need to focus on the present, but I find it really hard to not overthink, and it sounds like Robert Smith does too, especially if he's reflecting on who he was and he's not really considering who he is now. Because my interpretation of it is that whenever he's talking about empty out my mind of all the ghosts and all the dreams, all I hold on to in belief that all I ever am is somehow never quite all I am now. Basically, I think one interpretation of that is that I think that we have these wishes, I think we have these dreams, I think we have these hopes and these ambitions, and especially for me, there's just this sort of go to things, and it can be really hard to just stay in the moment and to just appreciate the present. Especially for someone like me, it feels like I'm just constantly focused on the next thing. I'm focused on the next video or the next book I'm trying to write or the next, literally anything. I'm focused on the next day, I'm focused on whatever is coming after that one, and I think that all plays into things, and I think that plays into your conception and your idea of who you are right now. You are very much defined by your dreams and your hopes, I think, and I just made a Chainsaw Man video that sort of discusses this. But really, this song is about overthinking. That's what it's about. I think too much of all to come, of how it will be after I give up. My weary dance with age and resignation moves me slow towards a dark and empty stage where I can sing of all I know. And so right there, he's singing about dying, and he's singing about thinking about dying, and he thinks too much on how things will be after he dies. And where he talks about that he's being moved to a dark and empty stage where I can sing of all I know, That reminds me a lot of Alone, because if it's a dark and empty stage, then you're the only person there. And as he said, this is the end of every song we sing alone. And I think that's what a reference to, just the idea that like we're born alone and we die alone. And especially that plays into In Nothing Is Forever, because that was someone who wanted Robert Smith to be there for them whenever they died. And Robert Smith wasn't there, and hopefully they had other people around them, but certainly he wasn't there. And so I could certainly see how with that in mind, Robert Smith would reflect on that and feel like maybe that person passed away alone, like he wasn't there to support them or to be there for them, and so they approached a dark and empty stage, and that was that for them. But certainly this is something that I think about a lot, just the idea that I'll die one day and you'll die one day, and I think about how I'll be remembered, and I think about how this YouTube channel will be remembered because of the fact that everything that's online is kind of immortal in a sense. Anything that's on the internet is going to stay on the internet, and it's very hard to take something off the internet once it's been up. And I have backup copies of all my videos, and I've gotten comments where people have said that they've downloaded some of my videos, and that's kind of odd knowing that I exist on someone's hard drive. And so I think a lot about legacy and what I'll leave behind, and I especially think about it a lot in the context of a writer and in the context of a creative. There are all kinds of books and stuff that I have read and will read and continue to read by people who are dead. You know, I have my copy of Paradise Lost here, and this was something that was written like 400 years ago, and I'm still reading it and I'm still appreciating it, and I wonder if people will do that with my work and my art and the stuff I make. And it sounds like that's what Robert Smith is going through. There are a lot of people who have looked at this record and almost seem to be hoping that it's the last Cure record, just because they're like, man, what a banger record to go out on. I don't like that at all, because of the fact that I think that creativity should just be a part of life. I don't think that you should really intentionally put a cap on your career unless you physically cannot do what you want to anymore. And I hate the thing that people try to do where they just try to make things perfect. It's like Tarantino. I'm gonna put out 10 movies and then I'm gonna stop there because I'm scared of making bad ones. And it's like, well, what else are you gonna do? What else are you gonna do with your life and your time here on Earth? And he's gonna write novels, and that's cool. But I feel like most people just kind of give up after a certain point. And I made an entire video about retirement and why I think it's bad, and the way that people talk about it is bad because they just kind of talk about it like they're just giving up, and then you're just gonna just relax forever and just sit there and do nothing for the rest of your life, and I hate that. And so I think people worry too much about legacy, and so I think that the only real way to leave behind a lasting legacy is to not think about it. And that is ironic, I think, especially considering that I've spent the last few minutes talking about legacy, and Robert Smith is going to leave behind a lasting legacy, and he's sitting here writing about it, and whatever. Yeah, the irony is not lost on me. And so with that, we will move on to track 8, Endsong. Endsong is the last song on this record. It was not always going to be, and I know that there is a 9th track that lyrics got posted to, I think, in CD booklets. Whatever the lyrics are for the 9th song are not on my record sleeve, but I know the 9th song was basically just Robert Smith with an acoustic guitar, I think, just singing about how things get better. But as it currently stands, Songs of a Lost World ends with track 8, Endsong. And Endsong is over 10 minutes long. The first half is just instrumental, and really it's a song that wraps up the album in a very cohesive way. And I'm outside in the dark, staring at the blood-red moon, remembering the hopes and dreams I had and all I had to do, and wondering what became of that boy in the world he called his own. And I'm outside in the dark, wondering how I got so old. Once again, Robert Smith is reflecting on who he was and who he's become. He's staring up at the same moon that they landed on in the 60s. But as I was saying, whereas he felt optimism and hope for the future then, he now feels a sense of cynicism and pessimism, and it's him essentially struggling with that and trying to figure out what happened. The blood red moon is imagery I really like, and whenever they played the song live, they had a backdrop of a blood red moon, and Robert Smith, before the album came out, he did a bunch of paintings of various songs on the album, and so they made prints of some of his paintings and put them up for sale. And so I did buy a print of the Endsong painting, and that seems to be the best angle. You can see my lighting umbrella here if I hold it like this. But anyways, the painting for this song depicts a blood red moon. And so this is just a really sad conclusion to the record, because there isn't really anything that's been accomplished, it feels like. And this is a complaint I've heard about this album, is that it doesn't feel like we went anywhere almost. The first track begins with the idea this is the end of every song we sing, and then the last track on the album is called Endsong, and it has these lyrics: it's all gone, nothing left of all I loved, it all feels wrong, no hopes, no dreams, no world, no I don't belong. And some people feel like the album didn't really go anywhere because it feels like we're ending at the exact same place we started at, which is that there's nothing and this is the end of every song we sing and everything sucks and everything's dying. And I get where people are coming from, but at the same time, I don't think that just because we end up as the same place as where we began, I don't think that necessarily means that we didn't go anywhere. And what I mean by that is that if you heard someone say, yeah, everything is dying and everything sucks and I'm old now and I don't have the hope that I used to have, then you might try to cheer them up and you might try to be like, no, things aren't so bad, things are great, and you have people who love you and care about you. And so that's kind of your initial reaction whenever you hear something really negative. And so it feels like the preceding 7 songs are kind of an argument against that, and they're ways of being like, okay, look at all these ways that things suck and things aren't as good as they used to be. I'm having people around me die and I'm feeling out of touch with the modern world and I feel alone and I know I'm dying and I think about dying a lot. And so it almost feels like the album is an argument in favor of pessimism, and it feels like Endsong is just the summation of that. Because Disintegration, I think, really starts and ends in 2 different places. I think Pornography starts and ends in 2 different places, because the beginning of Pornography is, it doesn't matter if we all die, and then the end of Pornography is, I must fight this sickness, I must find a cure, I must fight this sickness. But I do think that just the idea that the album starts and begins with the idea that this is the end of every song we sing, I think sometimes that's just the way life is, and there's not really any getting around it, there's not really any changing. I think sometimes it is the end, and this is kind of where we are. It's all gone, I will lose myself in time, it won't be long. Left with nothing, the end of every song, left with nothing, 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 nothing. And I will say the drumming on this song actually reminds me a lot of Pornography with how tribal it sounds, and so I have to give Jason Cooper props for that. But in the end, we're left alone with nothing. So that's how the album ends. It's very happy and uplifting and should make you feel good. There's a snippet of a poem by John Keats that's printed on this record sleeve. And when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of an unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think till love and fame to nothingness do sink. But I interpret this John Keats poem as basically saying that death is scary, dying is scary, being alone and fading away to nothingness is scary. But at the end of the day, everything kind of fades away and goes to nothingness. Fame and fortune die and fade away, and I regularly think about the fact that the sun will explode and that everything I know and love, and if it's not already gone by then one day the sun will consume everything, and that's scary. And so I think about it a lot whenever like I get a book and then I accidentally like tear a page or I bump it or I hit it weird. Everything dies and fades away, and what you do with that knowledge is kind of up to you, because you can sit and mope and you can be sad about it, or you can just kind of accept it and say that we all have a limited amount of time on this earth. The oldest person on earth is only going to live to be like 120 or 130. We are all mortal, and so as a result, we're all leaving earth sooner or later. And so I guess all you can really do is love those around you and care for them and try to make things as best as they can possibly be for now. So at the time of recording, this is the last proper Cure video that I have planned, meaning that Cureathon 2024 is officially over. So Cureathon 2024 took like 13 or 14 months. But all the Cure albums have been reviewed, though it does seem like they are working on a new record, and hopefully that'll be out sooner than later. If it is, then I will review it and talk about it. So where would I rank this album? I would say that it is in the top 3 Cure records. Yeah, it's that good. But I remember listening to this record and whenever it came out and being like, man, this is actually like so freaking good. And I remember texting my buddy being like, this is in the top 5 Cure records for sure, maybe even in the top 3. And yeah, I do think it's the 3rd best Cure record. Disintegration, I think, is freaking phenomenal. I don't think it's going to be topped. And then Pornography, of course, holds a special place in my goth vampire heart. And that record is freaking incredible too. But I do feel pretty comfortable ranking Songs of a Lost World as being the 3rd best Cure record. And really, the Cure just have an incredible discography. It's hard to go wrong. I would realistically say that the last 3 records on the list are not really that great, but everything else is either very good or a masterpiece. And so with this video, I have finished my Cure series. The playlist of me talking about all the Cure records is like 7 hours long, and so it's great for putting on at parties. If you're inviting someone over and you're looking to Netflix and chill, you can put this on. If you're falling asleep and you're having trouble, you can put this on. This playlist is great for putting on at parties. If you're murdering someone and you need some noise to cover up the screams, this is a great playlist to put on. If you have 6 or 7 hours of free time, this is a great way to spend it. This playlist is great for putting on at parties. You could potentially watch it 3 times in a day, and so it's great for putting on at parties. This playlist is great for putting on at parties. And so anyways, if you haven't seen all the others, I would highly recommend checking out all the other Cure videos I've made. The next bands whose discographies I will be going through are Nine Inch Nails and My Chemical Romance. Recommendations for this album, I don't really have many. In terms of music, the closest album I can think of would be David Bowie's Black Star, because it's also about death and dying, and David Bowie literally died of cancer 2 days after this album came out. I'd probably recommend like classic literature. I'd recommend like the Brothers Karamazov, but that's just more of a vibe than anything else. I would recommend like hugging your grandma and saying goodbye to your loved ones and telling them that you appreciate them. I would recommend trying to do whatever it is that you've been putting off or that you're scared to do. If you have an endeavor that you're thinking about doing, let this be your sign to go ahead and to try it out. And I guess this is it. So thank you, goodbye, see you later, I guess. So bye. I'm trying to film, so could you stop yelling football stuff or whatever the frick you're doing? Alright, thank you. I had to go tell my brother to shut up because he's yelling.